Welcome to the Trades Podcast, a podcast about the business of home improvement and promoting the trades to young adults.
Happy days here. This is the Trades Podcast. I'm Danny.
And I'm Jeff.
We're excited to have another awesome episode for everybody to listen to, get some good insight, and of course, gain some knowledge so you can pass it along to others. Anybody that you're in the field of construction, field of trades, and more specifically, plumbing, heating, and cooling. If you're in that area, this is the episode for you because we have the awesome guest and the full association representing San Diego and across the country. PHCC is in the house. Welcome in. We got Taylor and Mark. What's up? Yeah,
for having us.
Video. Yeah, we're excited to have you guys back on. But Taylor, Mark, we'll start with you, Taylor. Go ahead and introduce yourself back into the Trades Podcast. Let everybody know who you are.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. I think this is third time. Love it. I'm Taylor Bray. I'm the executive director of the PHCC San Diego chapter.
Awesome. And Mark, who are you representing and where you? I think you said you're on the other coast right now.
Yeah, Danny, Jeff, I'm Mark Valentini, Vice President of Legislative Affairs for PHCC National. We're based out of Falls Church, Virginia, just on the other side of the river from Washington, D.C., and I serve as their federal lobbyist.
Amazing. Yeah, it's a big shoe to fill right there, and we're excited to have you on so we can really find out what a lot of PHCC's got going on today.
Yeah, when you guys asked maybe for some ideas who to bring on, it was like a no-brainer. We got to get Mark on here. We got to get him talking to the contractors, let them know kind of in layman's terms what's going on legislatively. It's so important, and it's one of the big things that PHCC does for its members is advocate for them. So I'm excited to get Mark going with some of what he's been working on.
Yeah, well, there's obviously a lot going on in Washington. Just being in California, that alone should be enough for contractors to get engaged in everything that's going on there. And I'm not saying it's a very difficult environment. It's a very difficult regulatory environment. If you look at everything that's going on, going back to 2019 with the Berkeley gas bans, with efforts in South Coast and in Bay Area to establish zero NOx standards for water heaters and furnaces. Just on the labor side as well, there's so much going on in California that everything that's going on in DC pales in comparison. We're certainly doing our part, but it's important to understand how rules and regulations at the state and federal level have an impact on the boots on the ground.
For sure, and that's to Mark's point, PHCC of California. So we have Mark here from National, we have PHCC of California, and then here in San Diego, the local, right? There's several locals in California. We can all help get you access to that information on the state level. Mark's here mostly for federal, right? I believe. So I'm gonna just jump in with a little introduction to Mark, and then we can leap into some of this conversation. But for those who don't know, Mark is the Vice President of Legislative Affairs for PHCC National Association. So Plumbing, Heating, Cooling Contractors National. It's, we're one of the no big deal. We're one of the oldest and largest trade organizations representing plumbing and HVAC contractors in the U.S. Mark serves as the association's leading voice on federal policy and grassroots advocacy, specializing in tax policy, workforce development, energy regulations, tariffs, and consumer energy choice. He's a regular presence on Capitol Hill, and he's known for translating complex legislation into real-world impact for men and women running plumbing and HVAC businesses every day. And I can tell you, I'm going to be your best guinea pig for this because legislative stuff is like, woo! It's the legalese, and I need several cups of coffee and then a lot of explanation. So I'm glad you're here today to break it down for us.
Glad to be here. A lot of the legalese is on the regulatory side, and that's where I have a colleague, Chuck White, who's our Vice President of Regulatory Affairs, and he monitors all of the regulations that come out of the Department of Energy and EPA. Chuck is a third generation contractor, plumbing, HVAC, and electrical. You're not going to find anyone that is more thoroughly knowledgeable of the things that, of all regulatory activity, like thoroughly versed in building codes. He serves on several code committees. And so I have him as sort of my mentor to help me understand a lot of the technical stuff. And then in return, I'm providing sort of my knowledge on how Congress works and how government works. And we act as the yin and yang for PHCC's advocacy efforts.
We want to thank our sponsor. Superior Flooring Cabinet Designs is one of the landmark family-owned businesses in Encinitas. Owner Cheryl Robertson, with years of customer experience managing her family's hardware and cabinet business in North Park. Cheryl Robertson and the Superior team dive deep to learn about your project and help you find the perfect solution for your flooring and cabinetry needs. Call today at 760-436-0900 or visit www.superiorfloors.com.
My knowledge on how Congress works and how government works, and we act as the yin and yang for PHCC's advocacy efforts.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I've seen you and Chuck doing a lot. Like you do podcast episodes, also. So, good contact to have.
Yeah,
Could you
absolutely.
walk us through, for those who might not be familiar with the government relations work of the PHCC, like what a day-to-day looks like
Sure.
as
So, government relations, essentially, every industry needs some kind of a spokesperson, right? Whether, something that's publicly facing, right? So you have someone that does public affairs, but you also need someone that does that 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 front facing work on the government side. And so, honestly, anyone can do this, right? If you have an understanding of government and understanding of how laws work, it's and ideally a person like the person that would do this kind of work would be a contractor. I'm not a contractor, but the reason why a contractor is not here is because contractors are out like doing real work. And so it's incumbent upon me to understand how this industry works, and continue to learn about how this industry works and sort of how it evolves and what are the latest trends, and communicate that to lawmakers, particularly in Congress, because that's where laws originate, right? And their lawmakers are bombarded with information every day from thousands of different industries, right? For us, it's plumbing and HVAC, but then they're also hearing from pharmaceuticals, and they're hearing from agriculture, and they're hearing from energy and environmental groups, and social policy groups on all sides of the liberal conservative spectrum. And so they're just sort of drinking from the fire hose in terms of the information that's being bombarded to them every day. But they need to understand how various industry works, particularly ours, because the laws that they write have an impact on how our members do their jobs. And so it is my job, just at a very high level, to get them to understand how our industry works, how certain regulations and laws are working for us, and more important, like pointing out the ones where it's not working out for us, where there needs to be improvement, some fine tuning, or even outright elimination. And so it's kind of like but it's they can only do so much. And so we need to be out there. Think of it as sort of the floor of the stock exchange, right? You have, you know, uh, you have dealers on the floor, like screaming, trying to get their sale or to make their purchase, and eventually they get called on. And so that's kind of how my work is.
So, Taylor, can we break this down? Because I understand this is quite a complex subject, and focus on something that I was able to witness at the very recent PHC Trades Expo. You guys had a speaker in there in one of the classrooms off to the side talking about the change in I think it's coming up in October for the water heater
Hmm.
uh, venting process is
Yes.
changing. And that's on a national, you know about that, Mark? I hope.
Yes. So PHCC actually filed an amicus brief with Heating, Air Conditioning, Refrigeration Distributors International, as well as the Georgia Public Gas Association, I think. So we filed an amicus brief in that Supreme Court filing. And essentially what it does, it doesn't just applies to commercial water heaters as well as residential furnaces. This was a law that came out, or regulation that came out during the Biden administration, that would essentially eliminate non-condensing products, right? And so this obviously creates a problem. The people who drafted this law either doesn't understand, what goes into replacing a non-condensing product with a condensing product, or they don't care because their end result is they want to see more efficient products out there in the market, even though we go up against this tide where you have certain groups on the other side of us that are just pushing for efficiency standards that just eke out sort of a fraction of a percentage in efficiency with very minimum cost savings to consumers. But of course, it takes a lot of resources to not only draft the law and draft the regulation, but for manufacturers to retool and design new products.
Yep.
So for our intents and purposes, we're focused, particularly on the furnace side, because think about what it takes, to get a new system. Okay, so a new system where I live in Northern Virginia in Fairfax County, I have 2,000 square foot end unit townhouse that was built in 1977. And, to replace my system would probably cost me anywhere from $12,000 to $15,000 for about 2.5 ton system. Right. But the thing is, though, is that what if I wanted to, let's say it's a non-condensing system. All right. And then all of a sudden, I don't have the option to purchase another non-condensing system. I have to get a condensing system. And so what a lot of policymakers that drafted this law don't understand is that those products have to be vented differently. You can't vent it through a chimney. B vents out of the question. So you're going to eliminate an industry right there, or just decimate it. And then on top of that, you have to. So if you're running new vent, you're cutting up drywall, and then you have to run condensate, right? So then what happens in a basement? There's no place to drain the condensate. Then you have to put in a pump system, right, to pump that condensate out so it goes someplace where it's supposed to go, because you can't just let it spill outside. That water's contaminated. And so what should be, for someone like me, a $12,000 to $15,000 investment in a new system is going to cost a lot more. Because, we're going to be ripping out drywall, which means you have to patch it up. I have to get a drywall guy to come in, run new vent. And, that could easily double the cost of someone that just wants to have a system that works. And, a lot of it goes, a lot of what the lower court rulings had said, had tied into the features of the product, right? And trying to argue that, whether a system is a condensing system or a non-condensing system, and they're trying to argue that this is not a feature of the product. And our argument is that it absolutely is. We think it's a great feature that you should be able to swap out one condensing system for another, and just charge for installation for charge for installation, for labor, and for the product, rather than having to go through these additional steps and essentially modifying a home. I think that's a great feature because the customer saves a lot of money that way, and then on top of that, their home is comfortable. So that's a lot. That's some of the things that we're dealing with. I think it ties into the broader issue of gas bans that we've been seeing, particularly in California. It's also coming up in Colorado, in New York, in Massachusetts, to a certain extent as well. It ties into this broader effort to decarbonize, right? So they're coming after non-condensing, and then eventually those condensing gas products aren't going to be good enough for the other side either.
Yeah, and out here in California, you put those into the multi-unit perspective, and that just raises the cost of rent
Yeah.
and living in California.
Yeah.
So,
And
So
a lot of those regulations, especially with the energy efficient, there's tax credits that come with those, but a lot of those are potentially expiring, right?
At the federal level, they've been frozen.
Okay.
At the very least, they've been frozen. All right. And so California, I believe, had already had their IRA rebate funds released to them from DOE. So did Maine and New York. So the states that got in early put in their applications early and got that federal money. That money's already been spent. And, either way, they probably weren't going to get any more. So the states that still had pending applications, they're not going to be able to take advantage of that. And so I know that California, you still have some other state level rebate programs in place to incentivize heat pump installations. And, to the extent that it works, I mean, great. There's nothing wrong with heat pumps. And California has a climate that's, more conducive to heat pumps. Makes more sense there. But you're seeing this push in places like in the Northeast, where you have older homes, where people took advantage of the rebates, not understanding that having a heat pump, in the wintertime, it just wasn't keeping up. With the exception of maybe you're running a multi-zone, right? But then you have mini splits in multiple parts of the house. And so whatever you're not using in gas or heating oil or propane, you're using in electricity. And those systems tend to be more expensive. But if you're running like, central, if you're running like a central air heat pump system in a New England home that's old and doesn't have the upgrades that are necessary to sort of restrict heat loss, what we're seeing there is a lot of dual fuel systems that our contractors are working on. So you have that heat pump to get them through sort of the milder transitions to the cold winter. And then they switch to heating oil or propane gas to the extent they have access to it outside of, the major cities. And that seems to work fine, right? Because, heating oil is pretty expensive too, especially now with oil prices going up. And so, that seems to be, that seems to be a good solution. There's nothing wrong with heat pump products, but some people prefer gas.
Yep.
So not to get totally defeatist, for lack of a better term, like the end is nigh, so to speak, with these regulations coming in. There are solutions. There are are there opportunities that contractors can take advantage, or do they adopt extra training for their techs in this new technology? Is there are there any solutions to kind of get through these ever-changing regulations?
Heat pumps aren't new technology. They've been around since
Oh
at
yeah.
least the 60s.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's already incorporated into a lot of HVAC programs. So to the extent that one of the things we need to understand is that you know there has to be sort of a market demand for certain products, right? And my understanding is that it's the manufacturers, that provide training on those products, and certification and whatnot. And so, um, you know, uh, if there's a large market for a certain product or a certain class of products, then it's going to be worth it for the contractor to send his techs out, for a couple of days, pull them off the field, and get them trained on those new systems. But at the same time, if you don't have a lot of demand for a certain product, why should the contractor take a tech out of the field and send them out for like, whatever multi-day training is required, even if it's just a day, to train on a product that they might not install that much or not at all. I think, contractors will adapt, right? As you see demand for certain products increase and others decrease, there's going to be that training component that's necessary. And so as long as those opportunities are readily available and convenient, then, contractors will do what they need to do to get up to speed on those new products, making sure their employees get up to speed on those new products. But again, that's they can't take all of their guys off the field for like a day or two because they have to generate revenue and they have customers that need services right away. Customers can't wait for hot water for like a day or two. They can't wait for cold air in the middle of August. In the LA Valley. So it's going to be that's going to be also an incremental change as well. Like, they're going to be able to, if you have a contractor with a lot of employees, they're going to have to sort of phase in that education over time rather than pulling all their guys out of the field at once. So those are things that need to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, this is great info, Mark. Just coming from a broad perspective, I just know how structured PHEC really does gather a lot of this information between the chapters, between each state. And then you have your board members that come together to meet maybe more than once a year to talk a little bit more about one, what's happening within the community. What's
Right.
the information that, you're gaining on. These are what clients are looking for. This is the new technology that's being invented. Now, when you gather this knowledge, you're bringing this up to the legislation piece, to the law, to lobby and really get them the information.
Oh,
What's a way that a guy in the field can really contribute back to their chapter if they are a part of PHCC to really get you some good insight or something that you feel that would be a good topic for their, region or even the state?
well, if they have any information that they want to get up to me that's important, they can, like, they do that through Taylor, and they'll do that through Whitney, who's the CEO for PHCC of California. And then every PHCC member has a direct line to me. If they want to send me an email or give me a call, I always respond. I don't have an assistant. They talk to me directly. So if there's any kind of information that's important, and I need as much information as possible. I need to hear from contractors. I need to hear from their employees. And I need to know everything that's going on the ground, because then I can sort of piece together everything that's going on in different parts of the country to be able to tell the story to lawmakers, and making sure that they don't just have an understanding of our industry, but they understand the products, they understand the work that goes into what they do, and what the industry trends are.
Mhm. Yeah, that's something that Jeff and I, through the trades podcast, we've been able to have so many stories behind the scenes of, really from people to one employee all the way to 200 employees. That's coming across all different industries and spectrums. But even through PHCC, you just see the commitment that, a lot of these smaller companies are really dedicated to the community. And these type of changes do absolutely make a huge impact. And this is exactly where I think anybody that's listening out there onto this, and you are a PHCC member or not, this is going to be exactly a route that you'd want to know how to get involved if that's something that you'd want to do.
Right.
Because someone like Mark, he's out there, working his butt off to, really speak the truth and exactly what's happening within the industry. So
And
it's a
everything that we're doing, I think, Danny, you touched on a good point. Everything that we're doing benefits all contractors, and not just PHCC members. And so we'd love for those contractors that are not PHCC members. If you're in San Diego, make sure you talk to Taylor. And if not, you can talk to Sandy in Greater Los Angeles. You can, talk to Whitney in Sacramento, and be a part of PHCC, rather than, someone observing. You can actually be a part of it. It's, yes, you're benefiting, but it wouldn't be even better if you were actually involved with PHCC, so that you can have some skin in the game, and to be able to offer your own feedback, so that we can incorporate that into our strategy, into our advocacy.
Absolutely.
And then for those who are listening that maybe aren't in the state of California and do want to connect with your kind of local or state PHCC, you can go to the national PHCC website, phccweb.org, phccweb.org, and they have a map. You can click on your state and it will list out any local chapters near you or your state, and it gives you the contact information to the exec in that area. So you have PHCC resources and access at your disposal, kind of wherever you live. You don't have to be in California or San Diego, but we're here for you. And then even if there isn't one in your, specific area, National's there to help as
We
well.
we have active state chapters in 38 states and 175 regions. So, and even if you don't, even if there is no state chapter in your state, you can be an at-large member as well.
So one of the things that we were hoping you'd give us some insight, Mark, is seems like you have your ear to not just the plumbing industry, but the way the politics side of our country works.
Sure.
And there's been a lot of talk about the current administration with AI. Any insight on how AI and the future of plumbing is looking with all this new
I
talk?
think the two are integrated. AI doesn't happen without plumbing. right? Because that ties into data centers. It's going to tie into the broader subject of data centers, right? Because it's the data centers that are going to be sort of that source of information, of algorithms that AI depends on, right? And so those data centers, as we all know, require an incredible amount of resources: electricity, water, cool indoor air. Those servers need to be sort of in this cool temperature that's not quite a refrigerator, right? But not quite, an air conditioned home either. And so that's going to require a tremendous amount of energy. It's going to require a tremendous amount of sort of specialized knowledge to be able to design those systems. And what goes into those systems is where our contractors come in, because they're going to require water. You got to divert water resources to those data centers. And then, of course, on the HVAC and mechanical side, you need contractors that are going to be able to design and install those systems as well. Last week, the White House had hosted an event with the big IT companies, including Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, and about 40 stakeholders in the room. A number of them from IBEW. They were electrical contractors. PHCC was there, and it was Tony Bertolino, our national vice president. He was the only plumber in the room. And when and the president came to make some remarks, and the president had made had made a sort of a had alluded to what he, and I quote, big beautiful pipes, right? In talking, when he was talking about the plumbing that was required, the president was the only person that mentioned the necessity of plumbing in these dwellings, and Tony was the only plumber in that room, with other stakeholders. And the Secretary of Energy was there, Secretary Wright, and Speaker Johnson. And so it's not just electricity. Electricity obviously plays a huge role in that, right? Where is that electricity going to come from to power those data centers? And there was sort of a formal memorandum of understanding by those IT companies that they would work to provide those data centers with their own sources, with their own power plants. And so that ties into another issue of what that's going to look like. Is that going to be like all solar and wind? Are they going to have their own natural gas generating power plants? Or are they going to be, modular nuclear? And, nuclear reactors also require water. It certainly puts our guys to work. We have members that do work in nuclear power plants around the country as well. So that's, plumbing and HVAC are going to play an integral part, right? The electrical side going to provide the energy, right, to power those buildings. And, plumbing and HVAC is what's going to be required to maintain those systems and keep them from completely falling apart.
Wow. So it sounds like
Plumbing and HVAC are essential.
Yes. Yes.
sounds like there might be a job opportunity coming up in the field.
Yeah. I mean, look, placement right now is 6% between plumbing and HVAC. And that's going from the most conservative statistics that I can pull, which is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I'm sure I've seen a lot of stuff on social media. I've seen reports from the private sector, like from, like companies like McKinsey. They do these economic reports that are generated by somebody that essentially wants to sort of quantify whatever it is they're trying to achieve. I've seen quotes where we need 150,000 plumbers by next year. Maybe. But you can look at the most conservative statistics out there and see that there's still a problem. Okay. So if you look at BLS data, all right, Bureau of Labor Statistics, between plumbing and HVAC, between 2024 and 2034, at any given time, this industry needs about just under 95,000 people. Okay. At any given time between now and 2034. When you looked at the 10-year projections from the previous year, from 2023, all right, it was anticipated that you would need about 118,000. So we've seen a decline, all right, but the placement rate still hovers around 6%. So even though you still have this, like you have this sort of reduction in vacancies, we're still not getting enough people in. I think a lot of what has to do with that is, for every journeyman that comes into the industry, you have about maybe 3 or 4, master tradesmen that retire, right, or leave the industry. So, that certainly plays a role in it. I think also that reduction that we've seen over the past year has to do with the fact of what happened 4 years ago. Or 5 years ago, right? We had a pandemic. And so you had a lot of people that actually came we saw an uptick in enrollment in our pre-apprentice programs. It almost, it went up like multiplied by 6 times the amount of enrollment that we got in. And so that demonstrated just sort of across the building trades that there was this interest. They saw that we were essential workers. They saw that we, provide well-paying jobs. And so, and so I think that that's what sort of resulted in that uptick. And I think it also it also helped that we have, a $2 trillion student loan crisis where people are coming out of college with mountains of debt and they don't have a job that either pays enough or they don't have a job that mirrors what they studied in college. And so they need to work. And so we certainly have those opportunities if people are willing to learn, they're willing to work hard, then there's a place for you here.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. We cover the perspective of from your young generation coming even in high school with some people that we've had that have programs that they're implemented around locally or nationally.
Yes.
And then we speak to the people that are exiting. There's always that part where we always mention where the demand of people coming in demand or people that are leaving are more than what people are coming in.
Yes.
How do we speak to those folks that are leaving? How can they stay within PHCC network or even the construction trades network to continue to keep passing along that info, their master technicians, like you mentioned? What's one route that I'm hoping that you can probably speak to that a little bit?
So, yeah, I think, look, from what I've seen, there's plenty of opportunities from the first day of your apprentice program all the way up until, you just want to retire and call it a day, right? I think the one thing that you have to understand, all right, is that this job can be incredibly taxing on the human body physically. All right, there's a lot of days where maybe you're working out, outside where it's very hot or it's very cold. You're working in restricted spaces. Your body is often contorted, even if you're doing something like a garbage disposal, right? A lot of heavy lifting, especially with water heaters or with HVAC equipment when you're doing an install and taking out the old stuff. I mean, it takes a toll on your body. And so, but and I think that's where you start to see people leave. They've retired. They've saved up enough money, and they're tired, like physically tired, and they want to enjoy their kids and their grandkids and just, live life. And I'm certainly not going to hold that against them, but, it doesn't have to end there. For those that, that want to keep doing something else, but maybe they've been physically taxed, there's plenty of opportunities to do stuff. If you're a master contractor, you can just, run the business side of things. There's a shortage of instructors. I was just talking about how we're having a hard time getting people that are interested. I've talked to at least one group in Pennsylvania where it's like there's too many people that want to enroll in their programs, in their VOTEC programs, because they don't have enough instructors. They don't have enough classes. They don't have the space. And so these kids have to get waitlisted. We don't want to lose them to another industry. Right. So, you can be an instructor. There's groups are always looking for code officials. States are always looking for code officials, inspectors. I mean, Taylor can tell you how hard it is for our guys to get an inspection. In California, we need inspectors. We have one of our executives in Massachusetts, Wayne Thomas, was, he was a plumber and then he served on the plumbing board. And, he's also a code official and he's an inspector, and that guy's way past, turning a wrench, but he's still involved with the industry, so he's doing something that he loves and, and he's still, bringing in a paycheck too. And we can always, use that income as well. So there is something for everybody, past the point where you can, where your ability to turn a wrench isn't as strong as it used to be. So
at a certain point, we don't need
to stay involved as much as they can.
We don't need the physicality. We need your knowledge and we need your passion. And I mean, I could say it here on the local level. The best instructors make for those who are still so passionate about the industry and want to give back and continue to do so without the actual physical aspects of the job. There's so many ways to get involved, and then we're one of those schools that has a wait list for our pre-apprentice program, which is trying to pump new individuals who are passionate and want to get into our plumbing industry into the trades. And right now we have about a 200-person wait list because we have one instructor who's working on it, right? But we need funding, and we need funding, which is another kind of point I wanted to get into, Mark. And then we need the people to help instruct these future individuals coming into our industry. We need them to light the fire. But yeah, for funding, because getting into this workforce development, I know that the WIOA,
WIOA.
Yeah, WIOA.
WIOA.
Yeah, I wanted to spell it out for somebody who maybe isn't aware of that, but let's get into it, because there's that, and then the Perkins grant funding. I know it's such a beast, and we've been looking at it on the local level, and it seems so intangible at this moment, but hoping there's something for everybody who wants to take part in training, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are programs out there. I kind of feel like, when it comes to career education, I feel like the infrastructure is there. It's just it's imagine like building these awesome highways and then nobody's driving on them, right? Which is like the complete opposite of what California deals with, right? But it's so we have programs in place. Department of Labor has registered apprenticeship programs, right? And so the DOL certifies those. It goes through a process every 5 years. They offer grants for apprenticeship programs that meet certain criteria, particularly in underrepresented neighborhoods and low income communities. On top of the fact that apprenticeship in general, you bring on an apprentice, employers generally, cover those costs, right? And then, whatever the cost is incumbent upon the apprentice is pretty minimal, right? Compared to college. They're coming out of their program with, very little or no debt in a job. And so I think that's one of the things that we need to emphasize there. That's one example of a framework that's in place that works very well, just as it is. And then, barring that, we do have a lot of states where apprenticeship is not something that's required for HVAC, right? There's some states that require it. Maryland is one state that requires, at least a 4 or 5 year apprentice program. Unless you go with a union, in which case, like, that you're gonna go into apprentice program regardless of what state you're in. But barring that, there's ways to get in there. We have, contractors in Virginia, HVAC contractors in Virginia that'll train on the job, right? Or they'll recruit people out of a VOTEC or a community college, pick them up at a career fair or something like that, and then finish off their training on the job, right? Or just offer them a job and get them out in the field. And so, for those employers that are willing to do that, if they talk to their local workforce board, right, or state workforce board, and make sure they establish that HVAC is an in-demand field, which is not a difficult thing to do, and then they get on the employer training provider list, or ETP. When a workforce board brings job seekers in, they'll assess their skill set. And if they determine this is someone that might be good for HVAC, they'll send them to an employer, so that the employer can train them on the job. And then that comes with a grant of, up to $5,000 and maybe a little bit more. And it's not just employers. That also works for apprentice programs like what Taylor runs. That program is long overdue for reauthorization. It hasn't been reauthorized since 2014. It's still in place, but a lot has changed since then. There's funding formulas where a lot more money goes to administrative tasks as opposed to actual grants. Okay. And so we'd like to see that calculation shift so that more money is going to grants and less money goes to administrative costs. We'd also like to see something where the employers could provide a role in the skills assessment, right? I imagine there's been a number of times where a workforce board would send a job seeker to someone like an HVAC contractor. They say, yeah, this guy has the skill set for HVAC, and when the contractor trains them on the job, or one of his techs trains that person on the job, they determine, well, actually, you know what, maybe not, or maybe this guy isn't a good fit for our company, right? And so by allowing the employers to provide that assessment, they're assessing someone on a specific skill set that they know better than anybody else. So first, they'll know whether or not this person would do well in HVAC based on their own experience, and then number two, they can also determine whether that person is a good fit for their company, so that the workforce board doesn't run the risk of sending any duds, right? So that's one other thing that we'd like to see achieved in reauthorization. And there is legislation out there that we're supporting. The Employer Directed Skills Act was sponsored by Senator Budd of North Carolina, and so we'd like to see that happen for WIOA on Perkins. This is about $2 billion a year that goes to secondary schools, whether it's like, public high school, shop programs of whatever type, or going to vocational high schools. One of the issues there is that, I've talked to employers where they see these high school students that do very well. And this guy, like, I want to get this guy as an apprentice when he graduates. He's going to have a head start on everybody else. He's going to be awesome. And then they graduate high school and then they go to college, right? And so, good on them for going to college. I'm not going to issue, but we lose that person, someone that has like this sort of baseline skill set, someone that's demonstrated that they do well, and we lose them. So how do we mitigate that? And there is legislation sponsored by Congresswoman McClellan of Virginia, that would, establish, it would amend the Perkins CTE Act to establish a directory of employers and resources within the specifics, within the specific fields, under Perkins, career and technical education, so that those kids that are in high school, they're getting ready to graduate, they have this directory where they can go and they can find an employer, they can find resources, so that we can maintain that continuity as they go out into the real world. And then, of course, Pell Grants, traditionally used for four-year colleges and universities. With the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that passed last year, that opens up Pell Grants for short-term in-demand job training, about 150 to 600 hours, perfect for HVAC, right? Because since those guys are going to accredited VOTEX and community colleges, they could do that on a Pell Grant, all right? And then once they get through that program, like, they're paid for, right? So those are a number of different ways, like funding to get people in. So we just need people that are interested, and we need to keep those doors open.
Wow.
And scholarship opportunities as well. There's ample
Yes.
scholarship opportunities out there.
Yeah.
for
NARAD
the-
Foundation offers scholarships. Our auxiliary offers scholarships, and just make it just whatever financial barriers we can minimize or remove altogether.
I have a two-part question. I guess this is kind of rapid fire now, right? Because we're getting close to time.
Yeah,
I'd love
ahead.
to hear three. We already talked about kind of a workforce. We talked about energy. What are three other kind of big topics, kind of in a concise way, that are affecting our industry currently, like are currently in the legislature?
I mean, that depends. A lot of it depends on what state you're in, right? I think federally, our big issues are always going to be workforce, and it's going to be energy, right?
Okay.
And to a lesser extent, labor. And then, depending on what state you're in, obviously our members value the importance of licensing. We value the importance of building codes. Some states that's going to be under threat, and, our chapters there, push back to the extent that they can. Appliance regulations are not going to go away anytime soon. Even under this administration, there's already stuff that's going into place that was initiated by the previous administration. You have states like Colorado that are getting ready to implement zero NOx standards for home appliances. And so there's a lot going on. New York is, they're, under a law called Part 494. They are, already implementing A3 refrigerants, right? When we just finished the phase through to A2Ls like R454 and R32. And now New York is already saying you can't use that anymore. You got to switch to A3s. And so obviously that like decimates the market there. There's a lawsuit going on in New York as well. So, just federal level, anything having to do with energy, we want to see modernization of the Energy Policy and Conservation Act, strengthen preemptive language so that, states like California, and Colorado don't try to, get around regulating appliances through gas bans. So
Now, how can someone listening, a contractor, get involved or help or be a part of this in a bigger way?
okay.
And
So yeah, no, we have our legislative conference May 5th and 6th. It's open to everybody, right?
I'm
So,
going.
yeah, Taylor's going to be there. It's open to everybody, any contractor in the plumbing or HVAC space. Is welcome to register and to join PHCC, to go up to Capitol Hill. We arrange all the meetings. You'll meet with your lawmakers in the House and the Senate and their members of staff. We have educational programming in place to get you up to speed on all the issues and get a sense of what the regulations are going on in Washington that's having an impact on your business. And you network with other contractors, and that's the best way is to just to show up. Now, 80% of anything is showing up, right? I've
Absolutely.
heard 50%. But just if you can do anything, it's show up.
So again, that's May 5th and 6th in Washington, D.C.
Yep.
It's the legislative conference. You can Google PHCC Legislative Conference, or you can go to PHCC National site again, phccweb.org, for information and how to register. There's a room block. It's 2 days at the Capitol.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow,
I think through the
exciting.
trades, yeah, we've been able to see just how fulfilling it is. And when we have fulfilling topics like this, and for anybody that's listening, and you're put in some time, you probably have a career within the trades, and you're looking for something a little bit more in depth to really help out the trades and help out your community. This is a whole nother level that you can go out there and you can absolutely get involved. This is a key piece where, again, if you're already feeling fulfilled, you're looking for something else within the trades, this is exactly how you get involved. So, Mark, it's been just amazing for you to come in with some topics, and Taylor tag teaming with us to really throw out some hard questions as well, and really important topics and important questions that I think we all need to share with everybody and be able to have these conversations openly. I know it's a lot of it's a lot to handle, but I think, like you mentioned, just showing up and being there as a community can really uplift a lot of what we talked about today. So thanks again, Mark. This is awesome.
Of course, no,
Yeah.
it's
Appreciate
a
you.
pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Ew.
again, yeah, shout out again, Taylor. Any information where they can find it? I think you said phccweb.org.
PHCweb.org, web.org. Legislative conference is May 5th and 6th.
It's under the
Mark,
advocacy tab.
yes,
Under the advocacy.
under advocacy tab on the home page if you need to find it, or just Google PHCC Legislative Conference. It's the first thing that pops up. That's a great opportunity if you're in California, or a lot of the PHCC states do their own state one as well. So if you want to do Washington, D.C. on the federal level, great. Also, you can do the state level too, which is really important. Like Mark said, California's got some things rocking and rolling over here. So on the West Coast.
Absolutely. And we're calling out to everybody out there. So if you're not a part of PHCC, of course, reach out to the chapters and get some more information. But this is the Trades Podcast. We're super excited for everybody to be listening in, and we hope that you can like this, share it with anybody, because these are important topics, and don't shy away from it. If anything, that you're impacting every day that you're out there working, and Mark's definitely appreciates it. Taylor appreciates it. We appreciate it. So thank you all.
We're here for you guys. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.